The morning I caught her was the same morning I'd finally had enough. I was sipping coffee from my porch, watching the sun crawl over the rooftops, when I saw her again, Birgit Vanderhill, the HOA president, marching across my backyard like she owned it. She walked right through my grass, brushed past my newly planted lilac bushes, and squeezed between the fence post and my shed like it was her personal shortcut. No wave. No good morning. Just the same smug look she wore at every HOA meeting where she demanded mailbox repainting and measured grass height with a ruler. I set my mug down and walked to the edge of the porch. "Birgit," I called out. She froze mid-stride, turned around slowly like I was the one trespassing. "Oh, Yarden," she said, her voice all sugary fake. "This is just the easiest route to get to the walking path. You don't mind, do you?" I stepped off the porch. "Actually, I do. That's my yard, private property." "There's a sidewalk for a reason." She gave a little laugh like I had told a joke she didn't get. "Yarden, don't be dramatic. You don't have a fence on that side. It's not a big deal." "It is when it happens every morning." Her smile twitched, but she turned and kept walking. Didn't even wait for a response. Just vanished into the thin strip of HOA-maintained woods behind my lot, like she hadn't just trampled through my actual property. That night, I installed a motion sensor camera on the back corner of my house. The next morning, there she was again, same time, same route. Only now I had her on video, clear as daylight, cutting through without a care in the world. She didn't know she was being filmed. Yet. I printed a still shot of her mid-trespass, laminated it, and stapled it to a bright orange sign I stuck into the grass. "Private property. Trespassers will be reported." And just for good measure, I added a second sign with the image, "Trespass warning. HOA president caught on camera." The next morning, I made sure to be out front watering the yard. She rounded the corner in her usual pastel cardigan and athletic shoes and stopped dead when she saw the sign. Her face drained. She looked from the picture to me, then back again. "Yarden," she said slowly, voice cracking a little, "this is extremely inappropriate." "No, Birgit. What's inappropriate is a grown woman thinking she can ignore property lines." Her jaw worked like she wanted to say something clever. Instead, she turned around and walked the long way around the block. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The next few days passed in a strange hush. Birgit didn't show up in my yard again, but I noticed a few of her little HOA disciples lingering near the edge of my lawn during their morning walks, glancing at the sign, whispering, scuttling on like they were afraid standing too long would get them arrested. I didn't mind. They weren't the problem. Not yet. By the end of the week, an official-looking envelope appeared in my mailbox. No postage, just folded and slid in like someone was in a hurry. It was printed on HOA letterhead with the kind of formatting that tried to look legal but wasn't. My name was spelled wrong. "Dear Yarden," it began. According to the letter, I had committed community defamation, violated the spirit of neighborly cooperation, and was being fined $250 for posting unauthorized signage visible from the street. I read it twice, then a third time. It wasn't just passive-aggressive. It was fabricated nonsense. There was no bylaw against signs on your own lawn unless they were political or commercial, and mine was neither. And community defamation, that wasn't even a real term. I walked straight back into my house, pulled out the HOA bylaws binder, yes, I had one, out of necessity, and flipped through it until I found the section on signage. Nothing about warnings, nothing about motion cameras. And certainly nothing about posting a printed image of a trespasser caught in the act. I called the county code enforcement office that afternoon. Spoke to a guy named Nolan who sounded like he'd dealt with HOA drama before. He confirmed what I already suspected. Unless your sign violates a zoning ordinance, which yours doesn't, they can't enforce anything like that. You've got every right to protect your property. What about the fine? Has to be based on an actual rule. Otherwise, it's just a scare tactic. I'd ignore it. If they push it, you can file a complaint directly with the county. I thanked him, hung up, and started making copies of everything: the letter, the sign, the footage. I kept it all in a manila folder labeled Birgit and the HOA circus. The next HOA board meeting was set for the following Tuesday. Normally, I avoided those like the plague. But this time, I showed up 10 minutes early with a travel thermos and my folder. The room was already half full. Beige folding chairs, stale cookies on a plastic tray, and that unmistakable tension in the air that always came with too many retirees trying to control how other people lived. Birgit sat at the front table, flanked by her usual allies. Kent, the treasurer who always wore polos a size too small, and Denise, who treated the landscaping budget like it was her personal art project. Birgit's eyes flicked up when I walked in. She didn't look pleased. "Yarden," she said, like she'd bitten into something sour. "Didn't know you were on the agenda." "I'm not," I said, sliding into a seat in the second row. "Just here to listen." The meeting began in the usual dull fashion: budget updates, tree trimming schedules, a debate about whether the playground mulch should be cedar or rubber. Then Birgit cleared her throat. "There is one matter I'd like to address under miscellaneous," she said, voice syrupy. "An unfortunate incident involving a homeowner posting inflammatory signage." I raised my hand. She blinked. "I'd like to speak to that," I said. There was a murmur. Birgit tried to wave it off. "This isn't a public comment period, actually," I said, reaching into my folder. "Per Section 14, subsection D, a homeowner has the right to speak on any issue that directly pertains to them." Denise shifted in her seat. Kent looked suddenly very interested in the cookie tray. Birgit's nostrils flared, but she leaned back. "Fine, you have 3 minutes." I stood, held up the copy of the warning letter. "This was placed in my mailbox without postage. That's a federal offense. Second, it references rules that don't exist. Third, it accuses me of defamation for posting a security warning on my own lawn after someone entered my property without permission. That someone," I said, turning the page, "was you." I held up the still image, passed it around. A few people leaned forward to get a better look. Someone in the back gave a low whistle. "I've spoken to the county," I continued. "They confirmed I'm within my rights, and if I receive another fabricated fine, I'll file a formal complaint. If anyone here would like a copy of the video, I'd be happy to provide it." The room was silent for a moment. Birgit tried to recover. "There's no need for hostility. I simply took a shortcut through private property," I cut in, "repeatedly, without permission." "That's trespassing." A man in a windbreaker near the back raised his hand. "Isn't that a criminal offense?" "Technically, yes," I said, "but I didn't press charges. I assumed a warning would be enough." The murmurs grew louder. Birgit's face had gone pale. Kent leaned forward. "Are we liable if the board president was trespassing while acting in official capacity?" "No," Denise said quickly. "She wasn't acting officially." Birgit didn't say another word for the rest of the meeting. She kept her eyes fixed on her notepad, scribbling something furiously that didn't look like minutes. The next morning, the fine vanished from my account. No note, no apology, just gone. But the weirdness didn't stop. A week later, I got a call from my neighbor 2 doors down, Melinda. She was quiet, never involved in much, but we'd always been friendly. "She's going door to door," Melinda whispered. "Birgit, telling people you're trying to sue the HOA, saying you're dangerous." I thanked her, hung up, and checked my porch camera. Sure enough, there she was around noon, knocking on doors, clutching a clipboard like it was a holy text. I printed screenshots, added them to the folder. Then I filed a police report, not for trespassing, but for harassment. I included the letter, the footage, and the new screenshots. The officer took it seriously. Apparently, Birgit had a history. "There's another complaint from last year," he said. "Different street, same pattern, overstepping boundaries, issuing fines that didn't exist. You're not the first." That flipped a switch. I reached out to the other complainant, a man named Randy who had moved 3 blocks away to escape HOA drama. He told me everything: how Birgit had tried to force him to repaint his siding 3 times in 2 years, despite it being within code. How she'd entered his backyard during a barbecue to check for violations. How the HOA board never backed him up. He'd compiled his own evidence. Had a file just like mine. We met at a coffee shop, compared notes. Turns out, there were patterns: misused funds, unauthorized inspections, even a landscaping contract awarded to her nephew's company without a vote. We decided to go bigger. I filed a petition with the county to audit the HOA's finances. Randy filed a grievance with the state HOA Oversight Board. We both attended the next meeting, this time with 3 other homeowners who'd had it with the nonsense. One of them, a retired civil attorney named Miriam, offered to assist us pro bono. Birgit showed up late that day. She looked rattled, no clipboard, no cardigan. Just a frayed expression and dark circles under her eyes. And for the first time, she didn't sit at the head table. Randy and I didn't have to wait long for the cracks to widen. 2 days after the meeting where Birgit failed to show leadership or even sit at the board table, a letter arrived at my door. This one wasn't folded or stuffed in my mailbox. It was hand-delivered in a formal manila envelope with the HOA's letterhead, but this time it came with a signature from an outside law firm in town. The document inside was a cease and desist order. It accused me of orchestrating a campaign to undermine HOA authority and warned of potential civil liability if I continued to harass board members or misrepresent the HOA in public spaces. Now they were trying to scare me with lawyers. I brought the letter straight to Miriam. She read it once, then again, adjusting her glasses slowly with a dry chuckle. "This is hollow," she said. "They're trying to bluff you into silence. They'd have to prove actual harm. And they'd have to do it without explaining why their president was waltzing through your yard like she was checking sprinkler heads." I asked her if we should respond. "No," she said. "Not yet. Let them show their hand. If they try anything else, we'll file for injunctive relief." The next HOA meeting was scheduled for the following month, and it was shaping up to be something entirely different. Word had gotten around not just about Birgit's shortcut escapades, but about the audit request Randy and I had filed. Turns out, people had been quietly frustrated for years, but hadn't known what to do. Miriam suggested we hold a town hall-style prep meeting ahead of the official one. We reserved a room at the community library neutral ground, no HOA control, and invited residents through flyers and word of mouth. On the night of the meeting, over 40 people showed up. We didn't rant. We didn't speculate. We presented facts. Randy brought spreadsheets showing discrepancies in landscaping expenses that had doubled in 2 years without explanation. I distributed copies of budget allocations where entire line items were marked external consultation with no detail. Then Miriam took the floor. "The HOA is a legal body," she said. "That means financial transparency isn't optional. Misuse of funds, undisclosed contracts, and punitive fines not backed by bylaws, those are serious. If we don't act, we're complicit." That's when Linda from Silver Maple Drive stood up and said something none of us expected. "My husband used to be on the board 3 years ago," she said. "He stepped down when Birgit started hiring her nephew's company for all the landscaping. He brought it up once, said it needed a vote. Next week they said he missed 2 meetings and removed him. He never missed one." Gasps rippled through the room. "Do you have anything to document that?" Miriam asked. Linda nodded. "I still have the emails." We added Linda's story to the growing stack of evidence. A week later, the audit request was approved surprisingly quickly by the county's HOA Compliance Division. They sent an investigator named Carla Ramos, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who carried a satchel full of forms and a recorder she clicked on the moment she entered a room. Carla interviewed board members, requested access to bank statements, and asked to see all contracts with vendors over the last 5 years. When she visited me, I handed her my folder and pointed her to the digital backups I'd stored on a flash drive. She paused when she saw the cease and desist letter. "This is an intimidation tactic," she said. "And it's not the first I've seen from this neighborhood. One of my colleagues handled a case last year involving a similar letter signed by the same law firm. They're known for defending HOAs that cross the line." I asked how long the investigation would take. "Depends on how much they try to hide," she said. "But I'll warn you, if I find evidence of financial fraud, this could escalate quickly. We're required to refer that to the county prosecutor." Over the next 2 weeks, strange things started happening. First, the community bulletin board disappeared. One day it was there, pinned with notices about garage sales and babysitter services. The next, it was gone, replaced by a slab of plywood with a single laminated notice: HOA communications will be delivered digitally only. Then the HOA website went down, not for maintenance. It vanished. The domain redirected to a generic placeholder, and all meeting minutes, budgets, and contact information were erased. Miriam filed a complaint with the state's HOA Oversight Board. Carla added the digital disappearance to her report. Then came the real blow. Carla uncovered 2 landscaping contracts signed within the last year for nearly $60,000 each. Both were awarded without proper bidding, and both were paid to a company registered under a different name, but the address traced back to Birgit's nephew's home office. That was felony-level fraud. Carla didn't wait. She brought the evidence straight to the district attorney. Within 10 days, a subpoena was issued for HOA financial records. The next time Birgit showed up in public was at the community center, where she met with 2 detectives from the Financial Crimes Unit. Witnesses said she arrived late, stayed for less than an hour, and left looking like she'd aged 10 years in a week. Within 72 hours, the remaining board members voted to suspend her pending legal review. They tried to keep it quiet, but word spread fast. I ran into Denise at the hardware store, standing in the plumbing aisle with a blank stare. She didn't even flinch when she saw me. "She told us everything was by the book," she said, not making eye contact. "Said the nephew's company was the only one who'd take the job on short notice. I never thought to ask why it was always him." "You're still on the board," I said. "You could fix this." She shook her head. "I don't want to be anymore." That night, an emergency meeting was called, not by the board but by the residents. We gathered at the park pavilion. Randy brought a projector hooked up to his laptop, and Miriam drafted a motion for a full board recall. "I've already spoken with the county clerk," she said. "According to our own bylaws, 30% of homeowners can trigger a special election. We have more than enough signatures." The vote passed unanimously. The next morning, I dropped off the petition and motion packet at the clerk's office. The special election was approved within 3 days. Birgit didn't contest her removal. In fact, she didn't do anything at all. She never responded to emails, never returned calls, and her house went dark. By the end of the month, a for sale sign appeared in her yard. A week later, she was gone. The investigation into the fraud continued. Randy and I were both interviewed by a county prosecutor, and Miriam was asked to submit a formal deposition. Carla confirmed that charges were being considered against Birgit and her nephew: embezzlement, falsification of records, and breach of fiduciary duty. But the neighborhood wasn't waiting on a verdict to move forward. During the special election, we voted in 5 new board members, all homeowners who had shown up, spoken out, and proven they actually cared about the integrity of our community. Miriam was elected president. Randy took over as treasurer. I declined a position, but agreed to head the new Oversight and Transparency Committee. Our first action: reinstating the bulletin board, restoring the website, and publishing 10 years of HOA records online for anyone to access. The second: a new rule: no board member shall have any personal or financial relationship with contracted service providers. The third: a resolution that declared any non-emergency access to private property without written consent to be grounds for board removal. We posted the new rules on laminated placards at every entrance to the neighborhood. The best part: the sign in my yard stayed up. A few people asked if I'd take it down now that Birgit was gone. I didn't. It wasn't about her anymore. It was a reminder for anyone who thought power gave them permission that some of us still paid attention. And we weren't afraid to act. The day the charges came down, the air felt different, brisker, like the wind was carrying something new. I'd just finished repainting the trim on my shed when a patrol vehicle rolled silently through the neighborhood and stopped in front of the now vacant Vanderhill property. Two unmarked cars followed behind, their drivers stepping out with the kind of deliberate calm that only meant one thing. It wasn't a visit, it was an arrest. I leaned against the fence, paintbrush still in hand, and watched the officers step up to the door. The new real estate agent, who had been showing the house earlier that day, stood to the side with her clipboard clutched to her chest. She looked rattled. The officers went in through the front door, no drama, no shouting. But when they came back out, they weren't empty-handed. Birgit emerged between them, wrists cuffed behind her back. She looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in presence. Her usual stiffness was gone, replaced by a hunched, almost collapsed posture, like the weight of her own decisions had finally settled on her shoulders. One of the neighbors across the street fumbled with their phone, trying to record without drawing attention. I didn't blame them. It wasn't every day the self-declared queen of the HOA got escorted into a cruiser. By the time the car doors shut, half the block had quietly emerged from their homes. No one clapped, no one jeered. But there was a silence that said more than words, like a collective breath had finally been exhaled after being held far too long. That evening, we held a meeting, our first true community forum under the new board. It wasn't in a church basement or the library. This time, we set up folding chairs on Miriam's wide front lawn under strings of warm lights. People brought their kids, their dogs, even a few casseroles. It felt like a neighborhood again. Miriam stood beside the porch steps, holding a stack of printed documents. She's being charged with procurement fraud, falsifying HOA financial disclosures, and obstruction of a county audit, she announced. The DA's office confirmed she may also be investigated for mail tampering related to her previous use of unstamped notices. No one interrupted. Even the kids playing near the sidewalk went quiet. They also found that her nephew's company was never licensed for landscaping in the county, she continued. Which means every contract she signed with him was not just unethical but illegal. Randy stepped forward. We've submitted a full report to the state licensing board. I've also been in contact with the insurance carrier for the HOA. We may be eligible for reimbursement if misappropriated funds are recovered. A few people clapped, not for Randy or Miriam, but for the fact that things were finally moving in the right direction. I waited until the crowd had started breaking into smaller conversations before I approached Miriam. Think she'll see real jail time? I asked. If the DA pushes the obstruction charge, she said. Yes, that's a felony. Between that and the fraud, she's looking at years, not months. And the nephew, already under investigation. They raided his office yesterday, found records going back 4 years. If even half of them are doctored, he'll be facing federal charges. I nodded, letting it sink in. The woman who once strutted through my yard like it was her God-given right was now the subject of a criminal case that had spiraled far past a simple HOA dispute. She hadn't just bent the rules, she'd broken laws, manipulated finances, and intimidated homeowners to cover her tracks. But justice wasn't the end of the story. The real work was just beginning. In the following weeks, the new board moved fast. They launched a full internal audit completely separate from the county's investigation. Every invoice, every expenditure, every meeting minute from the last 5 years was pulled, scanned, and uploaded to a secure community portal. We discovered dozens of inconsistencies. Not all criminal, but enough to show how deeply the previous leadership had operated without oversight. Duplicate charges for minor repairs, inflated costs for mulch and irrigation systems, maintenance contracts that were renewed without community input. We held a vote to freeze all discretionary spending until proper bidding procedures were established. We drafted and passed a new transparency policy that required board members to declare personal ties to contractors. And perhaps most importantly, we set term limits for all board positions, no more lifetime appointments through backdoor maneuvering. Randy and I worked with a local nonprofit that specialized in HOA reform. They provided templates, legal advice, and even hosted a workshop for residents on how to read budgets, identify red flags, and hold boards accountable. The turnout was overwhelming. People who'd never attended a single meeting before were now volunteering to help rewrite old policies. Even teenagers showed up, offering to build a new website that would be easier to navigate and update in real time. A month after Birgit's arrest, we received confirmation from the county that the HOA's status had been flagged for mandatory oversight. A liaison would be assigned to monitor our operations for the next 2 years, not as punishment, but as support to ensure reforms took root. At that point, I finally took the sign out of my yard, not because I regretted it, but because it had done its job. It had started something. The morning I pulled it up, Miriam strolled by with her dog. "Looks like it's finally over," she said, nodding toward the empty spot. "Not over," I said. "Just rebuilt," she grinned. "You ever think about running for the board?" I shook my head. "I think I'm better as a watchdog." "Well, we're keeping the oversight committee. And we're adding a community ombudsman position." "What does that pay?" "Not a dime." "Then it's perfect." We laughed, and for the first time in months it felt like everything was exactly where it should be. The house that once belonged to Birgit sold within 2 weeks. The new owners were a young couple with a toddler and a scruffy dog who insisted on barking at squirrels and mailmen alike. They brought homemade cookies to the next forum and asked if they could plant a community garden in the empty lot behind the tennis court. The board approved it unanimously. As summer crept in, the neighborhood shifted in small, meaningful ways. People waved more. Kids walked to school in groups. The couple on the corner who always kept to themselves started hosting potlucks. The HOA signs that once carried vague threats were replaced with notices about movie nights and food drives. The new newsletter, written by a rotating team of volunteers, featured profiles of local small businesses and updates on repairs, budgets, and upcoming votes with links to the actual documents. No more secrets, no more power plays, and no more shortcuts through yards that didn't belong to you. The last time anyone mentioned Birgit was during a committee meeting when someone asked about the court date. "Next month," Miriam said, "but honestly, it's out of our hands now." We all nodded. There was nothing more to be done there. The justice system would run its course. And we, finally, could get back to being neighbors.